So there are several ways to plan for a narrative. I've already looked at the Freytag's pyramid of narrative structure, which is a really simple, common plot structure. We're going to, today in this video, look at another common plot structure called the hero's journey and compare it to the first story in the Harry Potter collection, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The hero's journey is a circular structure which revolves around two either real or metaphorical worlds, the known world and the unknown world. There are several points which appear around this circle. I'm going to just name them now, and then we're going to go into a bit of detail later when we compare to Harry Potter. The status quo, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, meeting the mentor, crossing the threshold, tests, allies and enemies, the approach, the ordeal, the reward, the road back home and refusal, the master of two worlds and returning with special knowledge. The status quo is a Latin phrase which means the existing state of affairs. In this phase, we meet our protagonists in their normal, natural habitat. In Harry Potter, we meet Harry, who lives in the cupboard under the stairs in his aunt and uncle's house in the normal world, the known world. We learn that he is treated rather poorly, and we also learn that he is an incredibly famous wizard and he is being placed there for his own protection. The status quo begins to be disrupted when Harry shows that he has magical powers. The call to adventure. Harry begins to receive letters inviting him to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which his uncle attempts to hide from him. The letters keep coming, but his uncle ends up moving the entire family to an abandoned hut in the middle of the sea to try and outrun the delivery. In this case, the call to adventure is present and persistent, but it is being blocked by Harry's uncle. So therefore, the call is being refused. The call may be refused by an antagonist or an obstacle, or even the protagonist, the main character themselves. As the call hasn't been accepted yet, a mentor appears in the form of a giant named Hagrid, who appears at the door of the abandoned hut. He hand delivers the letter to Harry, and there is a little mini refusal here as well, as Harry states that he can't be a wizard because he's just Harry. The mentor, Hagrid, serves to guide the protagonist, to give them information about who they are and the world that they're about to enter into. It is Hagrid who convinces him, reassures him, and eventually guides him to the threshold, which we will then cross into the unknown world. The threshold is represented by the entrance to Diagon Alley, the wizarding high street, where Harry receives the tools he needs to navigate in this unknown world, such as school supplies and a wand. In Harry Potter, there is actually a second threshold, platform 9 3/4, a wall that one must run through to reach the platform from which the Hogwarts Express train departs. The wall could actually be considered the first test as we move into tests, allies and enemies. In Tests, Allies and Enemies, Harry meets his friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. He then meets his enemy, Draco Malfoy, when they have actually arrived at the school just before they're about to be sorted into their houses. The Tests, Allies and Enemies part of the story can actually be really long. I would suggest that it sort of represents the first half of Freytag's Pyramid's rising action. This is where Harry navigates his experience at the school. He sort of tries, succeeds, fails sometimes, finds clues about a bigger antagonist, and he is tested along the way until he reaches the approach. Here he also learns about the Philosopher's Stone, something which turns out to be the antagonist's object of desire. Something which is somewhat of a trope in the fantasy genre. You know, the bad guy wants something, and the protagonist can prevent that from happening. The approach represents the protagonist getting closer to the antagonist. During the approach, Harry must face a few obstacles, such as Fluffy the two-headed dog, the flying keys, the chess game, using the skills and knowledge that he and his friends have learned along the way. When Harry passes all the obstacles, he must face the antagonist alone. We could name the ordeal like the showdown, if you will. It's sort of like good versus evil in a sort of a battle, even if it's not a grand battle, or, you know, nobody's shooting each other with guns, or there's no like action really at the end of the first Harry Potter story. It's just the confrontation between the protagonist, the main character, and the antagonist, the main obstacle. So Harry enters the final chamber where Voldemort, the evil antagonist, has possessed the body of a teacher and is standing before a magical mirror which shows him his deepest desires. Harry discovers that the antagonist's object of desire, the Philosopher's Stone, mentioned earlier in the Tests, Allies and Enemies section, it's actually appeared in his pocket randomly. Voldemort, in the body of the teacher, attempts to attack Harry, but when Harry touches him, he burns his skin. So Harry learns that if he touches this antagonist in a human form, the human body will sort of burn away. When the body of the teacher burns, Voldemort's soul comes flying out of his body and flies away, leaving room for a sequel. So all that hard work obviously is going to warrant some sort of reward. He did not get out of it unscathed. He actually collapses at the end of the confrontation, and he awakes in the hospital wing, surrounded by flowers and gifts and notes from his friends, so really accentuating how much he is loved. He then has a conversation with the headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, about how he has a layer of protection over him in the form of love, as his parents actually died for him in the past. So you could argue that the reassurance that he is loved is somewhat of a reward for him, as we started off the beginning of the story with him getting treated rather badly by his family, and feeling quite alone. Later on, at the end of year feast, he and his friends are further rewarded with house points, because of the hard work and effort they put in through the approach section of the story, and obviously the ordeal section of the story as well. The headmaster decides to give them extra points for the things that they went through, and they end up winning the house cup. So that's another victory or reward for those characters. So the next parts of the hero's journey are going to be significantly shorter. Please don't feel that you have to make these all equal in length, or that the paragraphs all have to match. That's not true at all. As we see obviously in Freytag's pyramid of narrative structure, rising action is the longest part of that structure. Just because this is a circle doesn't mean that everything has to be equal. If anything, these next points are going to come past really, really quickly. They're all going to just be explained in one or two sentences, I'm not going to lie. The road back home and refusal. Harry obviously doesn't want to go back to his aunt and uncle's house after having a splendid time at Hogwarts, but he's convinced that it's safer for him to be there during the summer, and he eventually leaves on the Hogwarts Express. Simple. We just have to show that the character really likes it in the unknown world. The Master of Two Worlds is more of a sort of, it's something that you have to expose to the reader. We are shown that Harry has learned how to navigate both worlds, the normal world and the magical world. Because the magical world has been so dangerous and difficult, he sort of has a new perspective on the world in his aunt and uncle's house, and views their mistreatment of him as more of an inconvenience whilst he's waiting to go back to Hogwarts. And for returning with special knowledge, Harry awaits his new adventure with new information in his mind. There is an evil wizard who is on the loose in the form of a spirit or a soul. That he is the only person ever to survive this evil wizard. That he, Harry, will return to Hogwarts at the beginning of the next school year. And that he was loved by his parents and is loved by his friends. This new knowledge is a perfect jumping off point for a sequel. But bear in mind, this is a GCSE and you are being asked to write a short story and not a box set collection of 500-page novels. Alright, so as usual, I'm going to use this structure to make my very own plan for a story. I actually find the hero's journey to be a little bit more difficult than Freytag's Pyramid, mainly because you are given less freedom. Like, you have to have a mentor in there. It's obviously you know up to you what kind of mentor you use, or like if it comes in the form of a person or a dream or something like that, something that guides the character has to exist in this structure. So I feel like you get a little bit less freedom than you do with Freytag's Pyramid of narrative structure, but this is the structure of most of my favourite stories, you know, so if anything I should really try and give it a go. Another thing to consider as well is just even if you're uncomfortable with it, just give it a go anyway, because you might come up with something really interesting. Right, okay, so we're going to get straight into it. The first section, obviously I'm coming up with this off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to just think of a brand new story right here, right now. So the first will be the status quo. Now, I want to start with a character that needs to develop, okay? I don't want to start with a fully fleshed out, amazing hero character. I want to start with maybe like a kid who's lonely, maybe they don't have any friends at all, they do a lot of solitary activities like reading, or, you know, just moving themselves away from social situations. So perhaps they just hang around in the library all the time. There's only like one guy there, the librarian. Yeah, you know what, we'll do that. So the kid, I'm going to say it's a girl, because I'm a girl, obviously. I like to write what I know. I don't know what it feels like to be a boy. So obviously I'm just going to make it easier for myself. I'm going to write from the perspective of a 13-year-old girl who hangs out in the library. That's the status quo. Now, I need to make sure that this is tied to a GCSE brief. I can remember off the top of my head there was one of the EdXL where there was, one of the brief was write about a secret. And I remember there was a picture of a diary with a lock chain around it. And there was like a kid whispering like a girl whispering in a boy's ear. So it says, write a story about a secret, use these pictures as sort of like idea generation tools. So I think I'm gonna use that. So it's this is how to sort of tie an idea into the GCSE brief. So I've got a kid in a library, and I've got this secret, and obviously I've got this diary, this book with a lock chain around it. So what can I do with that? Let me think. Okay, so I wanna with the call to adventure, I wanna just go straight in there with the diary and the whispering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the girl find the diary in the library, and cut straight away to she's in bed, she's asleep after she's been to the library, and she's thinking about the diary and what could be inside it. As she's fallen asleep, she starts to hear a little girl whispering to her, and I want that whisper to be really ambiguous and to leave the reader wondering what the whisper could be about. So therefore I'm going to have like a girl voice whisper to her, meet me in 243. The only reason why I say 243 is because it rhymes with me. Meet me in 243. What could 243 possibly be? Well, that's what the reader's going to ask, and that's what I want, is for the reader to ask questions. Who is the girl? What does 243 mean? So, obviously, my protagonist has been dreaming about the diary, so let's put two and two together. Call to adventure, the whispering, the questioning. So obviously there must be a refusal. The girl, my protagonist, would go back to the library and just kind of try and ignore the dream. But wherever she goes, She could hear the whispering 243, 243 until she eventually, like, her curiosity gets the better of her. So while she's in the library trying to figure it out, she could eventually end up falling asleep and wakes up to the librarian, who tells her that he can hear her saying out loud 243 in her sleep. The librarian is going to act as the mentor. He's going to explain that he has actually opened the diary before, and that it is a portal to the memories of the author. He is going to explain that he has been inside the diary, but he had never actually found 243 or what it meant. The librarian is going to tell the protagonist how to use the diary, and obviously he has the key for the diary. A cool little thing that I might put in, like a clue, is that when the diary is opened, before the ritual or incantation to cross the threshold or go in through the portal, I could have that, like, the last word written by the author of the diary was something like, "I didn't save her," just to give a few more bits of clues. And the reader can sort of start to predict then. Obviously, predictions are really important, especially when the reader can actually work them out and get them right. That the reader will start to believe, okay, right, so there's a girl who needs to be met in a certain place in order for the protagonist to save her, and that she hasn't been saved previously. So in the crossing the threshold section, like in Harry Potter, he crosses the threshold into Diagon Alley and receives tools that are going to help him. In this case, the librarian would probably tell the protagonist how to get into the diary, how to, you know, conjure the portal, but also give her a tool as well. So with keeping with the theme of, like, libraries, librarians, books and things like that, I think the, like, tool that I want to give the protagonist is a bookmark, which would sort of act as like a save, like a sort of checkpoint marker. So for example, if the character decides to go into, like, a cave or, like, into a dark situation, they could place the bookmark maybe, like, in a bush outside the cave, and all they have to do is say the word return, which is obviously, you know, return your books from the library, you know. Say the word return and they'll just appear at the bookmark. So it's kind of like a little get out of jail free card, but they have to, obviously the challenge would be you have to try and make it to the girl in the first place to grab her and then return to the bookmark. So it's kind of like, if anyone's ever played Pokemon, it's like an escape rope, immediate exit. So obviously she opens the portal, gets sucked in, crosses the threshold. So the kid enters the world, which is sort of like a dreamlike reconstruction of the author's memories. I want to also make it clear that this is not time travel. This is not going to affect time in any way. So in a sense, saving the girl is kind of pointless because the girl in real life would have died. But I think that this story is going to serve more as a way to develop the protagonist and to increase the protagonist's confidence. Because whilst the protagonist is in that world, it all feels very real, of course, apart from the strange shadows and mismatched measurements of the streets and lampposts and things like that. Maybe it's all just a little tiny bit weird. But yeah, I wanted to meet the writer of that diary in the world. I wanted to meet him while he's being bullied, and I really want to show that the author of the diary, let's just call him Tim, that Tim is really timid, that he's a really shy kid. He's really he's very not confident. He's actually a bit of a coward. After the protagonist saves him from the bully, Tim could explain that the bully was actually attacking him because a girl asked him to meet him in 243. But the author doesn't really know what that means, and is a little bit disorientated because of being attacked. So they could spend, in this sort of tests, allies and enemies section, they could spend a bit of time sort of figuring out what 243 means, or navigating the world and learning a bit more about each other. So obviously this is going to be a short story for your GCSE. You don't want to spend too much time in the tests, allies and enemies section. You just want to introduce characters, make it very clear what their intentions are, and try and speed that bit up a little bit. So I'm not sure how yet, because obviously I'm just doing this all off the top of my head, but eventually I want the kids to sort of figure out that 243 is a room on the second floor of their school. I could do this pretty easily just through dialogue and through them working it out, that he could have maybe seen the girl at school before, or that she could be really into science or whatever room, you know, whatever room it is. It might be an art room or something like that. They could just piece 2 and 2 together and quickly discover that 243 is a room in the school. When they figure that out, this will lead to the approach. Before they enter the school, I want the protagonist to leave the bookmark outside the school, maybe on the steps or something like that. And I really want the protagonist to enter the school, but I want the author of the book, Tim, to be too scared to enter. Because that's the point. He couldn't save the girl from what's going to happen. The whole diary is about the fact that he didn't save her. The protagonist could go in to the school and find the bully who is messing around in the science lab or something. Maybe he's trying to make like stink bombs and like mixing all the chemicals up and stuff like that. The bully could act surprised at the protagonist entering and tries to be threatening. Maybe sort of like turns a Bunsen burner on or something like that and tries to threaten the protagonist, and he ends up causing a fire. They could also both end up getting locked in that room, so like a chair could fall over and like block the door or something like that. And the protagonist could grab the bully and shout return to get back and drop the bully off on the steps. The bully could just then run away as the school maybe sets a bit more on fire. I don't know how this would work, because I know that science labs have gas cylinders so that the methane can get through to the gas taps, but I'm not sure how that is stored, so I might have to do a little bit of research on that. But either way, this is a fantasy story where anything can happen, and if anything, we're more looking at the structure of events, the tension, just making the story interesting. I don't think the GCSE markers are really going to care about technicalities such as where the gas canisters are kept in the school. Either way, the bully and the protagonist land outside the school at the bookmark. The bully runs away and the school just goes up in flames because of exploded from the gas canisters. Why not? The protagonist could have a sort of rousing conversation, like a persuasive conversation with the author of the diary, Tim. Tim could still refuse. He is terrified. He does not want to go in there at all. It's extremely dangerous, and to be honest, anybody should not enter a building that has just exploded. However, our protagonist knows what happens due to the fact that Tim didn't do anything. Our protagonist knows that this girl will die, so she goes in. She knows she has an escape option, so the only real test here is just getting to the girl, just finding the girl, which then leads to the ordeal. So the main antagonist in the ordeal is actually the flaming building. So it's a natural antagonist, fire. This could cause the building to fall apart, or for things to fall near the character. Some paths could be blocked, in which case you might have to find creative ways of getting around. And eventually the protagonist finds the girl, grabs her, and screams return, and goes back to the bookmark. So the rewards here, obviously, apart from the girl being extremely thankful for the protagonist saving her life, I feel as though the main reward here would be the newfound confidence of the protagonist, because obviously we're going to look at the return and the Master of Two Worlds in the sort of the same vein. Is the protagonist is going to come home and realise that they were able to, first of all, navigate a world, a brand new unseen world with a brand new person, Tim. She was able to get along with him. She was also able to overcome her fears and sort of do something completely incredible, such as save someone from a burning building. I think going back to the known world after that would make her first, like, sort of initial worries and issues seem a little bit silly, and then she's more able and she's more well equipped to deal with more sort of normal, tedious issues of life. So obviously we need the return. She's reluctant to leave because she's made friends. She doesn't have friends in the real world. We're going to do the return. She's going to come back through the diary. Because there isn't really an escape out of this world, there isn't a portal back to the real world. Instead, what I'd want to use with that is that this world exists because Tim wrote a diary about it. Because there are no more events written in the diary, the world just starts to dissolve. She's going to lose these friends whether she likes it or not. She has no choice when it comes to coming back. So she is rewarded with these friendships. However, those friendships don't exist. It's a simulation sort of thing. So she comes back. So the real reward then is the thing that lasts, which is her newfound confidence. When it comes to Master of Two Worlds, obviously she became the hero of the unknown world. She became the hero of the diary world when Tim couldn't be that hero. When she returns to the known world, all of her past worries and issues and anxieties kind of feel a little bit silly. She's grown and gained more confidence. So she's able to tackle the known world probably better than she can tackle the diary world. To prove this and to reward her even further, we could have her meet a new person. So there could be like a girl just walks into the library as she's like sort of talking to the librarian, telling the librarian about her experience. A girl could walk into the library and start looking at the books that she's interested in, like her interests, and she would just approach that person and introduce herself. It would be kind of interesting as well to come a bit more full circle. So like she spots the girl who she's interested in, the new girl who's walked into the library, and thinks, yeah, I'm going to go and talk to that person. And as she's closing the diary, like the last page could possibly, like, this is really cheesy, but I kind of like this this trope. It's a typical thing that happens in stories. So whereas before the book, the last page of the book says, I didn't save her, you could just have like at the end, I didn't save her, but she did. Sort of rounds it off a little bit. But then it also implies that time has been altered. But then you could also make the argument that the diary world doesn't exist in real time anyway. That the only thing that actually has been altered is the memory, is that the memory that the girl did survive. So it would essentially be changing a real memory into a false memory, but the girl herself in the past would have still died. It's not exactly a happy ending, but it makes the protagonist have a bit of character development, which is obviously the only thing we really care about in the hero's journey. It's about the protagonist. Again, this is not going to be the world's next bestseller. But for a short GCSE story, this is actually a really detailed plan. I recommend that more confident writers, people who think they can write a bit faster, attempt this structure, because there's a lot to cram in. And especially, I would, first of all, practice making this sort of structure, but also practice writing the full story in 40 to 45 minutes. I also advise combining Master of Worlds and Returning with Special Knowledge into the same sort of short paragraph. Anything after the ordeal is pretty much, you could do it in a couple of sentences. Like, there's not really much reason to develop anything anymore. Like, the ordeal has happened. We are just sort of wrapping up the loose edges. Now, here's my like top tip when it comes to the exam. I highly recommend pre-planning stories to take with you into the exam. So obviously you can't take an actual piece of paper with a structure on it, but if you are familiar with these structures that I've given you so far, Freytag's Pyramid and the hero's journey, I feel like you'll have an easier time with fitting the brief into it. So think of the brief, you know, like a holiday gone wrong or a secret or whatever. That's just the sort of the flavour, the packaging, if you will. If you remember a a structure like this, you're pretty much guaranteed to not run out of ideas halfway through. If you can't solve a question in your story, leave the question. Just throw the question away. If you're like, oh, I don't know how to make this, I don't know how to make the kids realise that the 243 means a room in the school, just have them have a conversation where they say, wait a minute, I've seen the number 243 before. It was on the door to the art room, you know? Like, don't give yourself so much of a problem with it. If anything, the thing you should put most effort into is describing the way the characters talk to each other, or making it a bit more heartfelt, or describing the setting and making it really unique, something that we've never seen before. If anything, I'd just focus on making it unique and sort of describe the setting, describe the characters, have them talk to each other like human beings, have us care about the character, try and make the reader sympathise as best as possible. As long as you can adapt the story to the prompt, memorising plots and plot structure will give you an extreme advantage in the exam. And as a final piece of advice, please don't try to do too much. If you don't want to get ahead of yourself writing for 40 to 45 minutes, you don't want to start writing a full novel in your GCSE. So I will set an assignment based on this video. If you do have any questions or ideas to discuss, then please leave a comment down below. And my name is Jenna Abbott. I am the English GCSE and functional teacher here at Bradford City House. Good luck, and I will see you in the next video.